Well, heidi ho, my peeps, and welcome to the first draft, which is still rough, of my of chapter 5 of my Untitled novel. So to set you up, when last we left Sarah, she had just received a phone call from the innkeeper in Topsfield to let her know that a room would be available for her that evening. So, and she was sitting on her porch, rocking. So, now we're gonna go ahead and start chapter 5. The breeze had kicked up a bit. Rocking back and forth lazily, Sarah gazed out beyond the long driveway to the woods beyond. The terrain was slightly hilly to the right and left of the house, and she felt an odd sense of comfort, as if the place had tucked her in. Rough though it was, and full of secrets, the house seemed to open its arms to her invitingly. Reluctantly heaving herself up from her comfortable perch on the porch, she went inside to rummage through her boxes and pulled out fresh underwear, her favorite oversized t-shirt for sleeping in, and her gray down-filled anorak. She figured she could wear the clothes she had on for one more day. Depositing a few toiletries from her backpack into her bag, she gathered up the tote, her handbag, and her keys, then headed back to town. Shadows dappled the hood of her car and flickered through the window as she drove beneath the canopy of trees, late afternoon sun playing through the leaves. Low rock walls ran in ribbons beside the road, indeed, along most of the roads in Essex County. Although she wasn't certain where the Topsfield Inn was located, she figured it would be near the town commons. Soon the commons came into view, studded with a surprising variety of buildings of every era, from the early 1680s through the 21st century. From Elizabethan to Federal, Second Empire to Greek Revival, the antique houses stood near ersatz colonials and neo-farmhouses of the present day. For all the variety, there was a pleasant cohesiveness to it all. The inn was housed in a large brick Federal-style building set back a bit from Washington Street, across the commons from a striking Greek Revival Congregational church, its white spires reaching skyward. This place couldn't be accused of charmlessness, Sarah thought as she pulled into a parking stall in front of the inn. As she climbed the wide steps and passed beneath the pillared portico, the front door opened as if by magic, and a young woman stepped out to greet her. "You must be Sarah," the woman exclaimed as she took Sarah's hand and pumped it enthusiastically. "I'm Martha." She reminded Sarah of nothing so much as an overeager Weimaraner greeting her beloved master at the door. Martha was entirely gray, from the top of her sleek gray French bob to the tips of her gray nubuck loafers. Without letting go of her hand, Martha ushered Sarah into the lobby and up to the front desk. "Just go ahead and sign in, and Thomas will take your luggage to your room." "Thanks, Martha, but I just have my tote bag for tonight." The woman leaned towards Sarah, peering at her thoughtfully, then exclaimed, "Well, how sensible! I wish more of our guests traveled as lightly." "I'm only about 6 miles from home," Sarah thought, then shrugged. "Okay, well, what room am I in?" "I've got you in number 8, last room on the right at the top of the landing." Martha handed her the key, the old-fashioned kind that fit into an actual lock, and then chirped, "We serve dinner in the dining room at 6. Although there are plenty of nice places to eat around here, I hope that you'll join us tonight." "Sure, that sounds great." Her voice sounding more reserved than great, Sarah mustered a big smile for the other woman and thanked her before heading up the stairs to her room. She could feel the woman's eyes on her as she climbed the stairs, then stole a backward glance before passing out of sight down the hallway. Yep, the whiner-rhymer was still looking at her with a hard-to-read expression. The word that flashed into Sarah's mind was anticipatory. Yep, Martha looked at her with an almost gleeful anticipation, which was actually more disturbing than if her expression had been threatening. Holy Mother of God, I really have landed in Mayberry, she thought. So far, she'd already met Andy and Aunt Bee. Who's next? Sarah had to admit that the room was lovely, with every amenity promising comfort and convenience. It was papered in pink and cream toile, with the same rose-patterned floral chintz on the bedspread, curtains, and comfy-looking wing-back chair pulled up to the open hearth fireplace. In the corner of her room, on a little raised platform, stood a large clawfoot tub draped on 3 sides in the same rose-patterned fabric. A basket overloaded with Crabtree and Evelyn toiletries stood at the ready on a small table. Odd, Sarah thought. Didn't that company go out of business years ago? She plucked a small jar of bath salts from the basket and checked the expiration date. No date was visible, but the package appeared quite new. A tiny bathroom completed the room, with a toilet and sink fitted behind a mirrored door. Sarah was beginning to ease into the idea that this whole town had an underlying vibe of oddness. Disappointed, she discovered that there was no air conditioner mounted on the floor under the exterior window. The first thing she did in a hotel was switch on the air conditioner full blast, just as soon as she'd lugged her bags into the room and locked the door behind her. It didn't matter if it was cold midwinter. She found the noisy sound of an old-fashioned air conditioner sublimely soothing. A wall thermostat, silently attending to the temperature, just wasn't the same. Sarah sat on the edge of the 4-poster bed and regarded herself in the mirror on the bathroom door. She wasn't the sort of woman that looked at herself very often, at least not with a critical eye. Gazing at the mirror, she took stock. Her hair was wavy, almost curly like Jason's, but much darker, and blunt cut at her shoulders. When she was a girl, she found a pile of her mother's girlhood magazines at the back of a closet. Mademoiselle, Glamour, and 17 were punctuated with the occasional Vogue or Town and Country. She'd hauled the magazines to her own room and spent hours poring over them, marveling at the fashions and styles of the mid-1970s. She'd found an article in Glamour from 1976 featuring an aspiring young fashion model who had just moved to New York. The layout was clean, almost timeless, showing the girl in baggy black pants, flat sandals, and a sleeveless white collared shirt tied at her waist. She had hair the same color and texture as Sarah's, but it was bluntly cut at the shoulders, while Sarah had been sporting long, grown-out layers. In the article, the girl talked about her first photo session with a professional photographer and how he'd convinced her that all models needed to start with a blunt shoulder-length cut. It could be styled a variety of ways and always looked chic. Within 6 months, Sarah's layers had grown out and she had her own shoulder-length bob, from which she had never strayed. Dark eyebrows gracefully winged themselves above her eyes. She'd always thought that her eyes were her best feature, resembling large, limpid pools of greenish-brown, like lake water on a summer day. She wore a charcoal cashmere sweater, inherited from her mother, and tucked into tailored khaki trousers. Her fry boots, the 14-inch campus style still iconic today, completed her outfit. She'd always thought this was a chic and businesslike uniform, and most everything in her closet resembled it. Looking at herself now, slumped on the bed, it just looked boring. It had none of the interesting élan of the Weimaraner's monochromatic gray. Is that what happened, she wondered? Did she simply bore Jason out of her life? Bunny certainly wasn't boring. She was a glittering, jiggling, giggling enticement. Still, Sarah mused, if she attempted to be glittering, jiggling, and giggling, she just would have ended up looking deranged. Laying back on the bed, Sarah promptly fell asleep, feet still on the floor. The ring of the old-fashioned rotary-style telephone startled her awake, and she nearly slid off the bed as she sat up and reached for the phone. Hello? It's 5:30, and this is your dinner call. Sarah was fairly convinced that Martha's only vocal expression was the cheerful chirp. Yeah, okay, I'll be down by 6, Sarah replied. And thanks for the reminder, she added before hanging up. The dining room featured polished wood tables and Windsor-style chairs, enough to seat about 25 guests. Martha guided her to a table by a window and handed her a small handwritten menu. There were no choices. You ate whatever the chef had created for that evening. Tonight, it was chicken marsala, asparagus, blended root vegetables, and lemon tart for dinner. Every item on the menu was among Sarah's favorites. Wow, she exclaimed. It's like your chef read my mind. Well, isn't that providential? Another odd chirp from the bemusing woman. Would you like to see the wine list? No, maybe just a glass of house white. And do you have any Perrier? Absolutely. The Weimaraner turned and vanished into the kitchen at the far end of the dining room. The meal was superb, among the best Sarah had ever eaten. The chef had to have been cordon bleu trained, or maybe he studied with Alice Waters at Chez Panisse. Whatever, he had a truly magical touch with food. She wondered why he was hidden away in this little village in Massachusetts. Martha popped by occasionally to make sure she had all she needed, but pretty much left Sarah alone to enjoy her dinner. Just as she was finishing up the decadent little lemon tart, Martha returned to her table. Is there anything else I can get you? Sarah said no, but she asked that Martha give her regards to the chef, adding that the meal was a complete delight. Oh, you can do it yourself. Martha trotted back to the kitchen and returned with the chef, a pale blonde man with the watery blue eyes and strong chin of a Dane. This is Giles, Martha said before pushing the man close enough to shake Sarah's hand, which he grasped shyly when she offered it. Nice to meet you, Giles. I'm Sarah. I don't usually gush over food, but I have to say that this is one of the best meals I've ever tasted. You're really talented. The man dropped his eyes and blushed. Poor guy, Sarah thought. With that complexion, he would never be able to hide his feelings. Thank you, he replied simply, and then vanished back into the kitchen. I'll take my check now, Martha, she asked with a smile. Good wine and great food softening her voice. Oh, no, we won't hear of it. Your first meal with us is on the house. Sarah leaned back and stared at Martha, face incredulous. Girl, you have got to be kidding. The Weimaraner was already headed back to the kitchen and called over her shoulder, Nope, it's a tradition. Sleep well. Sarah was about to reflect on the oddness of the situation when she realized that she really needed to get a new adjective. She'd probably used odd 6 times today and was actually getting tired of hearing herself think it. She pulled $40 out of her small handbag and left it on the table as a tip. She knew a meal like this would cost a bundle, and she figured that a generous tip was due these two. As she walked through the dining room toward the stairs and the lobby, she looked around and realized that she had been the only guest for dinner that evening. Yeah, she smiled to herself. I know you want to go for number 7, but don't even think it. Instead of going right to sleep, she decided to take a bath and filled the tub with water, which she was pleased to discover was very hot. Adding a generous splash of the foaming bath salts, Sarah settled back to consider what she should accomplish tomorrow. She blotted her hands on the towel hanging nearby, then grabbed her phone off the tubside table. She began to dictate a list, knowing that almost everything could be purchased at Walmart, even a mattress and fridge. Soon she'd completed a list that would provide her with everything she needed to set up housekeeping. Stepping from the tub, she toweled off and pulled on the old Columbia University t-shirt that had belonged to her mother. She suddenly felt an unspeakable longing to see her mom and talk to her again. Shaking her head, she remembered one of her mother's favorite sayings, "If wishes were horses, then beggars would ride." Slipping between the sheets, which smelled of lavender, she turned off the bedside light and wondered, just before she dropped off to sleep, what convoluted enchantments waited for her tomorrow.